Howdy-ho, Andrew here. Welcome to the Onion Buns and welcome to my Friday React video. So, as you know, every Friday I find a video, usually about entertainment, and do a react to it. And I found a great one this week. It's from a YouTube channel called QTR, and as always, I will put the link to his channel in the description of the video. But he is talking about The Running Man and 14 more remakes that bombed in the box office. Now, I watched a bit of this before, not all of it, but what got me to want to make is because some of these I actually enjoyed. I didn't actually know they were bombs in the box office. But now, full transparency, I honestly don't pay much attention to what bombs or what doesn't I just look for what I'm interested in. The only time I really hear about something bombing is when it becomes public knowledge and everybody's talking about it and you can't avoid the talk. But back in the 80s and the 90s, we didn't have the websites and the social media and everything. And so you really didn't know that movies bombed as big as they did. And now you're finding out about it. So I found that interesting. So I want to do a react on his video here because I was surprised by some of these and I will tell you what I thought of the movies that I saw. All right, so let's get started.
So I don't know if you guys have seen it yet in theaters, but the Running Man remake just cratered at the box office. They're going to lose over $100 million on this one. So let's talk about how Hollywood spent over $2 billion redoing movies we already liked, and somehow made every single one worse. One of them was so bad the director actually went to prison over it. Paramount dropped $110 million on this reboot starring Glenn Powell, who's been everywhere lately. Top Gun, Twisters, all big box office hits. On paper, it looked like a sure thing. Edgar Wright directing, a new adaptation of Stephen King's story, and a premise that should have been easy. One man against assassins in a dystopian hellscape. Didn't matter. The Running Man just fell flat. It opened with only $17 million in the US, $28.6 worldwide. Paramount was blindsided. Lionsgate had a bigger weekend with Now You See Me 3. It pulled in over $75 million global. So much for Glenn Powell's third tentpole.
So I am not going to see this movie. Man, I knew that before ever seeing this video. It didn't look like The Running Man to me. I can't read Stephen King. I tried. I've read exactly one book of Stephen King. It was thinner. I've tried reading his other books because I like the movies typically from the 80s and the 90s and the 70s, 80s, 90s. I like those movies, but I can't read. It's like Tolkien. I love Lord of the Rings. I can't read Tolkien's writing. It's just his writing style. I can't do it. So my impression of Stephen King comes from the movies, and The Running Man with Richard Dawson as that game host was so perfectly cast in that. And Schwarzenegger, it was an Arnie movie. It wasn't so much a Stephen King movie. It was an Arnie movie. And that's what drew the fans in was Schwarzenegger. And it was a fantastic movie. It was campier than all hell. And it was just a fun movie. Nothing about this looks fun to me. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not the guy that complains about dystopian settings like Fallout. Like, one of my favorite computer games is Deus Ex Human Revolution. Another one of my favorite computer games is Cyberpunk 2077. Both of those are severe dystopian landscapes. So I don't mind the dystopian setting, but nothing about this looks interesting to me. It's dystopian only works if your characters are interesting, and nothing about this looks interesting. So I'm not going to see this movie, but I love the original Running Man. It was such a fun movie. If you've never seen it, go watch it. It's campier than all hell, but it's fun. Nothing I've seen about this suggests it's fun. I might catch this on Amazon Prime when it's streaming for free on Amazon. But other than that, I'm not going to see this movie. I don't know anyone that is.
Been a lot of talk about what went wrong. Some blame the remake for not really feeling like an Edgar Wright movie or just being a bad remake. But behind the scenes, this flop is about management f***ups. Thing is, Running Man got greenlit under the old regime at Paramount, then the entire C-suite changed over to David Ellison's team. When that happens, new execs inherit a bunch of movies they don't care about or even want to bury. And there's this mess in their marketing department. Their marketing boss, Mark Weinstock, left, and Paramount sat in limbo waiting for the new guy, Josh Goldstein, to show up. He didn't get there until a month before release. During all this, the marketing team had no direction. The studio was cutting jobs, and nobody could make a decision. Goldstein is the guy who pulled off big launches like Dune 2 and The Batman for Warner Brothers.
See, it's ironic that he pulled off big launches. I didn't like either of these movies. Like the new Dune, there's nothing in the new Dune series that wows me. Like it's got great effects, sure, but give me the old Dune movie every time. Nothing in this movie. Like, first off, I hate this actress, Xenia or whatever her name is. I don't think she's a very good actress. Batista's a horrible actor. So you got two negatives right off the bat, and then the Batman. The only way they could have made that show worse is if they made him sparkle. And I'll leave it at that.
But there's only so much anyone can do when they show up to a campaign already falling apart. In the end, none of it would have mattered if the movie was any good. If you make something people want to see, word of mouth takes over and saves at least part of the box office. That didn't happen here. This was just a bad remake nobody wanted. Sometimes I feel like Hollywood just...
Okay, I'm going to jump in right off the bat here. It drives me nuts that this movie failed. Momoa, and I'm not the biggest Jason Momoa fan. Like, I loved him in Stargate Atlantis. That's when the first time I saw him. And I loved him in Game of Thrones. And he was perfect as Conan. And I thought, as a Conan fan, because I did read Conan, unlike Stephen King books, I did read books of Conan. And Momoa was perfectly cast in that. And I thought this movie, it had its quirky, weird imagery that has become so commonplace in Hollywood since 2000. You got to have the neon lipstick and all the stupid shit that you don't need. Yeah, that was in there. But overall, of all the Conan movies, this movie felt the most like Conan. Schwarzenegger was fun. He was a lot of fun as Conan. And I've read some stuff with things he wanted to do that he wasn't allowed to do because it was the 80s and they didn't allow that sort of stuff. They would nowadays. Like, one of the things he wanted to do is he wanted to rip an arm off of one of his opponents and beat another opponent to death with the ripped off arm. That's very Conan. But they wouldn't allow it in the movies back then. They would nowadays. Unless there was a breast, then oh my God, everybody's heads would explode because, oh my God, a female nipple. Ooh, Americans. Anyway, so yeah, it drives me nuts that this movie failed. It really does. I love this movie. I'm not going to apologize for it.
Loves remaking two things: cartoons into live action and Schwarzenegger action movies. Conan the Barbarian is the perfect example. This 2011 version starred Jason Momoa. He should have been a natural for a role like Conan, but the movie just didn't land with anyone. Domestically, it took in barely $21 million with a total worldwide gross of $63.5 on a $90 million budget. Factor in marketing, and it's a huge loss. The studio was hoping for a new franchise. Instead, they got nothing. The project bounced around Hollywood for years. Warner Brothers spent 7 years trying to get it moving.
And maybe that's where the problem came in. Like, I don't follow this stuff. So I didn't know it'd been bouncing around like that. And maybe that is where the problem with Conan actually laid. It wasn't about Momoa. It wasn't about all the other stuff that we do see. It was all the stuff behind the scene that we didn't see. And that's very possible. Like, how much did the budget balloon because of the behind the scene crap? So, that, again, I don't follow this stuff. I don't think the average viewer follows this stuff. So that may be it.
The Wachowskis, John Milius, even Robert Rodriguez all took a shot, but it kept falling apart. Eventually, Marcus Nispel landed the directing job. He's more famous in the industry for his ego than for his movies. Lionsgate put up $25 million just for U.S. rights. They poured money into marketing, hoping for a big launch. But the tracking numbers were already pointing to a flop, and then reviews finished it off. Basically, the movie missed everything what made the original work. Momoa looked the part, but the script was a mess top to bottom. Generic dialogue, nothing memorable, all computer graphics instead of practical. Even Momoa admits the whole thing was taken over and turned into a big pile of shit. And director Marcus Nispel called it the worst experience he had, describing it as a dog on many leashes. Back in the 2000s, studios...
Okay, here now I wasn't at all surprised to find out this movie was a box office failure. But I love the original with James Caan. It's one of my favorite. I consider it a B-grade movie. Okay. And it's one of my favorite B-grade movies. I still watch it to this day. This monstrosity, there's only two good things in this entire movie. One, Rebecca Romano's breasts, and two, the announcing of Paul Heyman. And there's a hell of a story that I'm not going to go into. I've heard Heyman talk about how he got hired on this, and look it up. It's hilarious. But those were the only two good things about this movie. I don't know what the hell they were thinking when they came up with this idea.
Went looking for old properties to repackage. Instead of picking something everybody wanted, MGM dusted off Rollerball, a 1975 cult classic about a violent dystopian sport. The remake was supposed to be a hard R action movie under John McTiernan, the guy who directed Die Hard. He wanted violence and nudity, but the studio panicked and started messing around. Scenes got chopped up, violence toned down, night vision slapped over entire sequences, shadows added to cover nudity, and blood literally changed to sweat with digital effects. All that studio interference ballooned the budget to $70 million.
Okay, so Tiernan's a great director. Like, Die Hard is my favorite movie of all time. So it's in great hands with him. It sounds like he wasn't allowed to make the movie he wanted to make, and that probably really did hurt the movie. But in the end, I don't think any of that stuff, the lack of nudity or the lack of blood or any of that hurt the movie to I'm sure it hurt to a little bit, but not to a great degree. I think the problem with this movie was this movie. Like, it was a train wreck from start to finish. It made no sense. I don't know what they were going for. I really don't. Even the sport itself made no sense. Like rollerball in the 70s, that made sense. Like, you could see roller derby turning into rollerball. That made sense. I don't know of any sport out there that's going to morph into this. You know, it boggles the mind. So I don't know what the hell they were thinking.
The result was a film that made no sense, got trashed by critics, and was surrounded by nothing but negative buzz. Rollerball crashed in 2002, earning just $25.8 million worldwide. It was so bad it actually stood as one of the most expensive box office bombs for years. And that's not even the craziest part.
Paul Heyman, one of the best parts of this movie.
McTiernan actually went to jail over this. Turns out he fought with producer Charles Roven about what kind of movie Rollerball should be. So he hired infamous Hollywood fixer Anthony Pellicano to wiretap Roven, hoped to catch him bad-mouthing studio execs. When the FBI came asking about it, McTiernan lied to investigators. That move got him sentenced to a year in federal prison in 2013. If there's one thing Hollywood really believes in, it's Tom Cruise.
Okay, so I am a Tom Cruise, the actor, fan. I'm not really a Tom Cruise, the person fan. Like, that whole Scientology thing, just like, that's a big X. It just kind of eliminates him from the running. But I had no desire to see this movie. None. I don't care who was starring. They could have got Brendan Fraser to come back and I wouldn't have seen this movie. Nobody was asking for this movie. It's just, nobody was asking for it. Why would you make it? It made no sense. And that's just as a fan. He's going to go into a lot more detail than I am, explaining why this movie failed. I'm just saying nobody wanted to see it. I don't know of a single person. And admittedly, I'm a nerd. Okay. I play D&D. I read fantasy. I watch science fiction. I play computer games, Fallout, and just a host of other games. Like, by the Webster's Dictionary definition, I'm a nerd. And I had no desire to see this at all. And I loved the Brendan Fraser movies. They were fun, they were campy, and everything. Everything I saw about this, None of that existed.
So when Universal tried to launch their own cinematic universe, they handed crews $195 million and expected gold. Instead, they got one of the biggest box office bombs of 2017. Everyone remembers the 1999 Brendan Fraser version. It was a hit, and it worked because it had heart. Universal's reboot wanted to launch an entire dark universe.
And this is part of the problem. Again, I am a nerd. I don't really go for horror anymore. Like, I've kind of outgrown that. Horror is for teenagers and 20-year-olds and maybe even some 30-year-olds. And then you kind of start outgrowing it. But I had no desire to see any of these characters. And I love this actress, Eva Green. I love her. And, Depp's okay. Cruise, Phantom of the Paradise or Phantom of the Opera, Creature, Black Lagoon, Frankenstein. I have fond memories of all these characters, but I really have no desire to see them nowadays. So I don't know what the horror genre is like for the modern day teenagers. And I think they're more about The Ring and those type of shock jock stories, not about the creatures anymore. In a very generic term, I think that would be quite accurate, though, is I don't think creature horror is really in with the younger generation nowadays. And as an older generation, I'll be 60 in a couple months, I've outgrown it. I don't know anyone my age that goes for this stuff anymore. So
all the old monsters, big crossover plans, the Marvel treatment. The problem was the movie didn't know what it wanted to be. It tried to balance horror and action because it's Tom Cruise after all, but failed at both. The Mummy pulled in a worldwide box office of $410 million, which sounds big until you see the costs. Production plus marketing hit about $345 million. Once theaters take their share, the movie didn't even break even. Universal had to shut down the Dark Universe before it could even get started. The old Mummy got 2 sequels and a spin-off. The new Mummy killed an entire franchise. Every few years, someone in Hollywood gets the idea to remake a classic by swapping the cast. They hope it'll feel fresh, but most of the time it just feels awkward. Ghostbusters 2016 is the textbook case. $144 million budget, all-female leads, and nonstop PR, selling it as a culture war event instead of just, making a funny movie people actually want to see. Controversy started before the movie even opened. Fans thought the remake was
So I'm not going to go into great detail on this travesty of a movie. What I'm going to say is these 4, I have no desire to ever see any of them in any movie. Period. None. There's female actresses out there that, sign me up. I'm in all the way. Rah, rah, rah. Amazing. Charlize Theron, amazing actress. Sydney Sweeney, I've liked everything I've seen her in. I want her to do more challenging roles than what she's been doing thus far. There's so many. It's the point is these 4, 1, I can't even name them. 2, they're not funny. And for a Ghostbusters movie, you better damn well be funny. And 3, who cares? That ultimately is why this movie failed. I put up the big woke word because let's face it, that's why they were hired. They were hired because it was woke. That was all the rage in 2016 and moving forward. Woke, 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 DEI, woke, woke, woke. And it failed. Everything fails. It's still failing to this day. You could have picked 4 other women with acting chops and credentials and able to be funny and put them in here. And it may have changed the fate of this movie, but you went with these 4. They're not funny. They're not entertaining. They're not appealing. Nobody wants to watch them.
Brawl. It made just $229 million worldwide, which is way short when your costs are as high as this. Sony lost about $70 million on it, and any hope for a sequel died quick. They had to bring back the old Ghostbusters timeline with Afterlife just to reset the brand. What's wild is how everyone involved just keeps blaming the audience, the fans, or politics for why it didn't work.
This drives me absolutely nuts. Hey, buddy. The fans pay your wage. You are making products for the fans. So shut the bleep up and make products for the fans. You are not making products for yourself, for your political agenda, or your little echo chamber, because clearly that echo chamber does not support your products. And it goes the same for gaming. These gaming studios that keep putting out shit, and then they're losing money and they're blaming the consumer. You're not buying our shit. Of course not. We don't want to play shit. So take your political agenda, turn that some bitch sideways and shove it right up your you-know-what. Make products that appeal to the wider audience. That doesn't mean you have to agree with the wider audience, but they are the ones that are paying for it. So it's your job to appease them. It's not their job to appease you.
Melissa McCarthy blamed people being afraid of women, Leslie Jones blamed racism and misogyny, and director Paul Feig blamed Trump supporters. Basically any excuse but the actual movie itself. Look, it wasn't the worst movie ever, but it just wasn't good. The script was weak, the whole thing fell off, and people just moved on. The problem with Ben-Hur is that it was already made and everyone has already seen it, and it stars Charlton Heston. You can stream it anytime you want. I'm not sure what these folks made, but it wasn't Ben-Hur. And honestly, I'm not sure why they did it. But here's how it happened. In 2013, MGM got a $650 million credit line from JP Morgan. Finally enough cash to start acting like a real studio again. Flush with that new money, MGM put Ben-Hur into active development as their big comeback, even though everyone already knew the story and nobody was asking for a redo.
Yeah, I don't think everybody knowing the story matters, because we keep seeing the same stories being redone and to various effects. Some of them are successful, some of them aren't. I think it comes down to the quality of the story being reimagined than the fact that they're redoing a known story, because you know, like we've seen other things get redone and redone and redone and redone. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wish Hollywood would stop frickin' redoing everything and come up with original ideas, or even start adapting properly. So many books that have never seen the light of day. You know, like there's so much, as I said, I'm a nerd. There's so much fantasy and sci-fi out there that has never gotten the treatment from TV or movies that could be adapted into movies. Just adapt them properly, people. You know, I wish Hollywood would do that, but instead they keep rebooting old things. Ben-Hur, Charlton Heston, I think that was in late 60s, early 70s, I forget. And so enough time has passed that, yeah, I don't think the modern audience has seen the old Ben-Hur. So I don't think the excuse of they can just watch it on streaming holds, because with all the technology nowadays, you could have done it. I think it was just a matter of this movie didn't look interesting. Like the only thing I remember, I never saw it. I saw the original. I never saw this one. But the only thing I remember about this one is the chariot races in the advertisement. That's all they did for the advertisement. Well, you know, we've seen chariot races in other movies. So a chariot race is not by itself going to attract moviegoers. And in the end, I think that's ultimately what did them in.
Paramount jumped on as partner, and together they pushed the marketing hard. Huge ad buys during the Rio Olympics. Olympic athletes cut into the TV spots, all of it. The tracking was soft even with all that hype. Paramount hoped for a $20 million opening, but more realistic numbers were closer to 15. The reality was even worse. 11 million opening weekend, number 6 at the box office, and left in the dust by Suicide Squad and Sausage Party. The original Ben-Hur won 11 Oscars, set a gold standard for epic.
Yeah, 1959, so it wasn't even the 60s, it was the 50s. So enough time's passed. Like, you can't use that excuse. 59 to 2016, you know, that's almost 50 years has passed. So you can't really use the excuse that it's been done already, so don't do it again. 50 years is 50 years is enough time to redo something. Just comes down to quality, I guess.
Filmmaking and starred Charlton Heston. This remake, directed by Timur Bekmambetov, just didn't have any reason to exist. Producers Mark Burnett and Roma Downey had hyped it up as the most anticipated movie release of 2016, then went silent as the movie sank. With a $100 million budget and $94 million global box office, Ben-Hur bombed. The Total Recall remake is a weird byproduct of Hollywood bankruptcy.
So I admit I enjoyed the Total Recall remake. It was not like the original Total Recall, but I enjoyed it. I thought it could have been a little more adult orientated. That in 2012, Hollywood seemed to be doing that a lot, where they weren't really comfortable going for the hard R. And I think that was really the biggest downfall of this movie. Otherwise, I quite enjoyed this movie. And I like Colin Farrell as an actor. I don't care what tough times he's had.
Rights auctions gone wrong. Coralco Pictures, the original studio, imploded after legendary disasters like Cutthroat Island. In 1997, the rights to Total Recall, sequels, prequels, remakes were auctioned off in bankruptcy court. Miramax grabbed them for $3 million, tried to get a sequel made with Schwarzenegger, burned through draft after draft, and then just sat on it when nothing worked. After the Weinsteins left Miramax, Disney held the rights for a while. In 2009, Sony picked them up with Miramax holding an option to co-finance. They wisely passed on that. Sony went all in and shelled out $125 million on a family-friendly version.
And that's probably what did them in. As I said, in 2012, Hollywood was scared of the R. They wanted the family-friendly. And this topic matter, it's not family-friendly. So either do it properly or don't do it.
They handed the lead to Colin Farrell, who was already a box office risk at the time. Marketing was everywhere, but nobody cared. Tracking suggested 25 to 30 million opening, and it hit the bottom end at 25.5, opening behind The Dark Knight Rises, which was already in week 3. Reviews were mostly negative. Audiences gave it a toxic C+ cinema score, and Sony quickly saw the writing on the wall. In their own financial report, Sony pointed to Total Recall as the main reason their profits from The Amazing Spider-Man were eaten up. In the 2020s, it felt like every studio rushed to pump out live-action remakes, and usually those make plenty of money. The Little Mermaid looked like a guaranteed hit, a beloved animated classic, 2 Academy Awards, and songs everybody knows by heart. But Disney decided to go all in. Casting Halle Bailey as Ariel set off a wave of online drama. People complained she didn't look like the 1989 animated version.
I don't know what they're talking about. She's just a splitting image of it.
Or Hans Christian Andersen's original description. But that was just the beginning of the film's problems. $240 million was the official budget, but according to Forbes' report, the real number hit $380 million. Add marketing and the cost shot up past $500 million. Most of the money went to a cast of digital fish and underwater CGI, which only made the movie look creepier. The result was a miscast Black Ariel, a bunch of weird CGI sea creatures, and a remake that nobody asked for. The losses probably went into the hundreds of millions. The Little Mermaid is in the same league as Legend.
See, this is funny. I love this movie, John Carter, but it's the same. Disney. Like every time I see Disney, I get very wary, because this movie, the only thing that would have made it even better and probably would have made it a hit is going to an R rating rather than the family-friendly version they put out. That's where John Carter from Mars failed, because Delia Thorne, the co-lead, the female lead, is not a PG character. Not in the novels, not in the comics. She's not a PG character, much less a G character. So, yeah, but I love this movie. I thought this was a really strong movie. I never saw this movie, and I never saw this movie, but this one I loved. It always bothers me that it did so poorly, because if it had been anyone but Disney and it had been given the R-rated standard, I bet you this would have been a new franchise as well.
Legendary Disney bombs like John Carter and Tomorrowland. Remake fever was in full swing in the early 2010s, but Universal decided to dodge a direct remake of John Carpenter classic and instead put out a prequel, still called The Thing. Producers Mark Abraham and Eric Newman convinced the studio it was worth digging up. What's funny to me here, they literally said remaking Carpenter would be like painting a mustache on the Mona Lisa. They should have listened to their own warning and left it alone. Development started back in 2006, but the project only really took shape by 2009. Universal and Strike Entertainment split the $38 million budget. The studio wanted a prime horror release, but then came the problems. The film was pulled for pricey reshoots, and Universal decided the original practical effects weren't enough. So they went with expensive CGI that ended up replacing most of the already finished work. To push the movie, Universal went hard on marketing. They even added a Thing-themed maze at Halloween Horror Nights in their theme park, but nothing helped. The film opened to less than $9 million and topped out at just $31.5 million worldwide. Hollywood's been remaking Invasion of the Body Snatchers since the 50s, and two versions, the 1956 original and the 1978 update, are still considered classics. So in 2007, Warner Brothers thought it's time to remake it yet again, this time with Nicole Kidman and Daniel Craig. The result was a textbook case of how not to handle a remake. Production was a mess from the start. The movie wrapped in December 2005, originally aiming for a summer 2006 release. After seeing Oliver Hirschbiegel's cut, the studio ditched it and ordered massive rewrites, handled by the Wachowskis. They brought in James McTeague to direct 17 days of reshoots, mostly adding generic action scenes. The film's budget ballooned to $65 million, and release was pushed back to late summer 2007. By the time the invasion finally landed, everyone knew there was trouble behind the scenes. Word got out about the reshoots and director swap, and tracking was already weak. The movie was basically toxic at that point. It opened against Superbad and The Last Legion and bombed with just $5.9 million that weekend. Its box office run ended at $40 million worldwide on a reported $80 million budget. After all the piecemeal edits and reworking, the invasion lost almost $60 million after everything was counted. Russell Brand was suddenly everywhere for a few years, and somebody at one...
Here's a remake that should have never happened, plain and simple. The original Arthur was a work of art, but I've never seen the appeal of Russell Brand, so...
Brothers got it into their head he could carry a movie. Producer Larry Bresner still had the remake rights to the original 1981 Arthur through his company, so in 2008 they started looking for a way to cash in. The original was a smash, but this remake was designed as a showcase for Russell Brand, and he'd later call it a mistake. That's about right. They put $40 million into it, stacked the marketing, and gave it the full studio push. Brand got top billing, his first and only real shot at being a studio lead, but obviously he couldn't carry it because Russell Brand isn't a movie star, never was. Critics called the performance career-killing, and anyone who remembered the original just ended up disappointed. The movie finished at $47.7 million worldwide, which left tens of millions of marketing spend completely in the red. The budget didn't even get covered by the actual theatrical run. Brand was never able to open a movie by himself, and this flop proved it. After Arthur, Hollywood stopped trying to make him happen as a lead. The original Oldboy, directed by Puck Chinook, is a classic. The American remake had a $25.8 million budget and brought in just $5 million. Basically, they had no clue what made the first one work. Spike Lee was in the director's chair with Josh Brolin starring alongside Elizabeth Olsen. But from the beginning, something was off. They tried to copy the story. Man locked up for 20 years, released without explanation, goes looking for answers. But what made the Korean version unique just got lost. The studio cut Spike Lee's version by almost an hour after he turned it in. They even chopped up the big fight scene that was supposed to be filmed as one continuous shot. What ended up on screen was a watered-down imitation, like a generic revenge flick. Film District, the U.S. distributor, didn't even bother to market it seriously. They shuffled release dates, dumped it in theaters right up against Frozen and a handful of other movies over Thanksgiving. Film District was already going under. They basically folded after this flop with Oldboy as their last release. Spike Lee himself called it the worst experience of his career and said flat out, the film that hit theaters was not the one he and Josh Brolin made. Stallone was on a cold streak when he signed up for Get Carter. He hadn't headlined a hit since Cop Land. When this one hit theaters, Warner Brothers didn't even bother screening it for critics. The movie opened against Meet the Parents and Digimon the Movie and pulled $6.6 million opening weekend. Good for third place. People hated it, slapped it with a D+ cinema score, and the box office never recovered. The final take was just $19 million off a $63 million reported budget. But that budget was its own story. Get Carter was financed by Franchise Pictures and Germany's Entertainment. After seeing how cheap the finished film looked, Entertainment's CEO dug into the numbers and found out Franchise had cooked the books. Franchise boss Ely Samaha invented approved overages, phony costs, and fake deferments. Like, for example, a made-up $8 million perks for Stallone. Mark Canton was supposedly paid $6 million as producer, but actually got just $1.5 million. There were $3 million in fees that went to nobody. So Entertainment sued and won $77 million, and by 2004, Franchise Pictures was wiped out.
Wow. Sounds like the guy that was doing the books for this movie should come work for the Liberals here in Canada.
As for Stallone, after Get Carter, he was mostly off studio posters. Driven's campaign barely showed his face, and Avenging Angelo skipped theaters completely. It took years for him to recover. The original film was another MGM property.
Here's another movie that should have never been remade. The original film in 1984 is an absolute masterpiece. Hollywood needs to learn, when you have a masterpiece, leave it alone. You can re-release it, but don't try to recreate it because you won't. Like, this movie had an absolute AAA+ cast of actors coming up. The new Red Dawn did not have any of that. You know, like you had in the original, you had Swayze. Okay, so you had Patrick Swayze, Jennifer Grey, Charlie Sheen, C. Thomas Howell, Leah Thompson, Powers Booth, Daryl Dalton, Brad Savage. Like, you had amazing actors. Here's more. Henry Dean Stanton, Lane Smith. So you had a who's who of up-and-coming actors at the time. Flash to this new one in, 2012. But let's see. You had Chris Hemsworth, Adriana Palicki. Okay, she's not known for her acting. We'll leave it at that. Jeffrey Dean Morgan from Supernatural. He was the father. And yeah, that's about it. So, like, you can see why the new one did not have the gumption of the old one.
With a recognizable title, and MGM wanted to squeeze some money out of it. The remake follows a group of teenagers fighting back after North Korea suddenly invades the U.S. This time, it's Spokane, Washington. The cast included Chris Hemsworth, before he was Thor, Josh Hutcherson, and Josh Peck. They called themselves the Wolverines, fought with guerrilla tactics, and basically tried to recapture the small-town underdog thing that worked the first time. But this remake never had a chance. MGM was deep in debt, $3.7 billion, and basically running on fumes. Mary Parent came in as chairman in 2008, picked a few projects she thought could make money fast, and Red Dawn was one of them. But MGM went bankrupt right as Red Dawn was being finished in 2010. With the studio in reorganization, everything stalled. The film sat on the shelf for a year until Film District finally bought the U.S. rights and released it in late 2012. By the time Red Dawn hit theaters, all momentum was gone. Not that there ever was one. It opened against big holiday releases like Life of Pi and Twilight, got hammered by critics for its weak story and generic action, and made just $14 million its first weekend. It was nowhere near enough to make a dent in the $54 million budget. It limped to $50.9 million total, not even covering costs. Disaster movies can work if you catch the right cultural moment with the right cast. Poseidon didn't do any of that. This was a $160 million remake of The Poseidon Adventure, a 70s disaster film about a cruise ship flipped by a rogue wave. This time they brought in Wolfgang Petersen, who knew epic blockbusters after The Perfect Storm and Troy. The cast was solid with Kurt Russell, Richard Dreyfuss, and Josh Lucas, and the visual effects were good enough to score an Oscar nomination. But the whole project was a warning sign from the start. The script struggled to attract any truly bankable leads, but the studio put all its faith in Petersen and the idea that bigger visual effects could save anything. Poseidon landed in May 2006, right between Mission Impossible 3 and The Da Vinci Code. Worst possible spot for a mid-level tentpole. Opening weekend brought in $22 million, and it eventually grossed $181.7 million worldwide. On the surface, that sounds okay, but with a $160 million budget and massive marketing spend, the math didn't work. Once the theaters took their cut, the studio was left with a loss. Petersen himself admitted he should never have done it. After this one, he stepped back from the studio system entirely.
So there you go. 14 of the biggest bombs out there. Like I said, some of them I really liked. And some of them I absolutely did not understand why they were being made to begin with. And yeah, so like I said, I found that fascinating because a lot of these I didn't know had actually bombed. A couple of them I did, like Conan. Conan one always bothered me because, again, I enjoyed Momea's Conan. I enjoyed it a lot. If I'm being brutally honest, if I want to watch a Conan movie on film, I'm watching that Conan movie because that Conan movie is the closest to the books, the novels. That's nothing against Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger's was a camp fest and it was fun. And, you know, in its era, it was AAA all the way in its era. But I liked the Momeo Conan more. So it always bothered me that it bombed, but I didn't know all the backstory either. You know, so yeah, it's like I said, I saw that video and I found it very fascinating and I thought you guys might enjoy it. Anyway, that's my video for today. If you like the video, leave a like, a subscribe, and a share. I'm trying to grow my channel and a like, a subscribe, and a share does me wonders and I do appreciate it. Takes 1 second to subscribe, costs you absolutely nothing, helps me immensely. Just hit the subscribe button on the bottom of the screen. Always feel free to leave a comment. Were you surprised by some of these, or did you know? Did you not know? Come in, tell me what movies are missing that you thought would be on the list. Also, leaving a comment really does help me with the YouTube algorithm and getting more eyes on my videos. And as always, pew, 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 and shit. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.